Russia has just wrapped up a joint Zapad 2025 drills with Belarus. Dictator Putin even showed up in military uniform, but critics, including Russian propaganda, mocked the exercises as unrealistic, more like as a circus than real preparation, repeating the same mistakes Russia made in Ukraine. At the same time, Europe and NATO are stepping up, testing new defensive operations like Eastern Sentry and planning a long-term drone war with Ukraine. To discuss this, I'm joined by retired Australian Major General Mick, a leading analyst of modern warfare. Good to have you here with us, General Ryan.
It's good to see you again.
So, General Ryan, let's start with this Zapad 2025 drills. Usually Russian military drills give little real insight into the strength and capabilities of the army, but they are always rich in political signals. Some say those trainings were very serious, others, even Kremlin propagandists, as I said, ridiculed them as a circus that ignored the lessons of Ukraine. But what is your assessment?
Well, I think Zapad was very much a political exercise. Belarus is kind of important, but I think having Indian observers there, as they announced, was a significant development, given that how the Indians feel they've been mistreated by the current American administration. These exercises, particularly now, are all about signalling to Europe Russian resolve, Russia's threats towards Europe. It's just one of the many means, one of the many mechanisms that Putin and his regime make threats against greater Europe.
With the Indians observers, we saw U.S. officers invited to attend in Belarus, and I think they weren't there by accident. What signals is Putin trying to send to the West with their presence?
Yeah, I thought the presence of American observers was interesting. I think we shouldn't read too much into it from the American perspective. If I was a senior American officer, I would love to have my people, my intelligence staff, being on the ground and observing them. So I think senior US commanders have done exactly the right thing to trying to get a sense of what's going on, the sense of who was there, who was saying what. I think for them that was the right thing to do. But the Russians, as we know, will spin this very differently. They will spin this that the Americans are more on their side than they have been for some time, that they're less supportive of Ukraine. So I expect to see lots of Russian propaganda about the presence of Americans and indeed Indians at Zapad 2025.
Yes. And while Zapad 2025 was happening, NATO has launched Eastern Sentry after Russian drones. They crossed into Poland's airspace. And it involves fire jets, ships, air defenses, and counter-drone systems. How timely is this response?
Well, it's timely if you think that this is the first time that Russia's threatened Europe. It's probably a couple of years behind what was actually needed to deter this kind of Russian action before it happened. I mean, Eastern Sentry should not have been a response. It should have been a deterrent exercise a couple of years ago to ensure that Russia never even contemplated flying all these drones over Poland. But Putin clearly feels emboldened after the Alaska summit and his other interactions with the American president. And he probably felt that the NATO response to these probing actions of these drones would be not big. And Eastern Sentry is a response, but it's not a major response.
How would you see the major response to everything that has happened in Poland?
Well, a major response would be countries sending more than 2 or 3 fighters. I mean, we're seeing a few units go forward, a few fighter jets here and there, but you would see NATO issue a declaration about what would happen next time Russia did this. We haven't seen anything like that. We've seen lots of words. We haven't seen a huge amount of action. We haven't seen an upsurge in European aid. We haven't seen the Americans even come out and criticise the Russians, other than a narrative around maybe this was a mistake. So, those kind of things would be a more significant response than what we've seen now, but we just haven't seen that.
General Ryan, don't you have the impression that NATO countries in in the face of Russian threats, kind of a split it, because Baltic countries, Poland, Finland, they definitely scared of those who, bordering with Russia. They definitely scared of possible attacks, provocations, etc. But other countries, they don't feel that. So do you feel that there is some misunderstanding in NATO about that?
Well, I think first and foremost, we have to acknowledge NATO has come a long way since February 2022. It's certainly not the moribund organisation it was before the full-scale Russian invasion of February 2022. But that said, I think your point is a good one. There are different views in NATO. I think Eastern European NATO countries that have been occupied by the Russians before, that have fought the Russians, that have faced off against them, know the true face of Putin. They know he is a deadly threat to them. I think the Central Europeans are starting to come round to that view. We've seen Germany start to step up its investment. But I think Western European countries and others such as Hungary are probably not helping NATO decision-making by either underestimating the threat or deliberately confusing NATO decision-making because they're more aligned with Putin than NATO.
Yes, and then there is another initiative, Drone Wall, together with Ukraine, and 6 billion euros from the EU and Ukrainian technology, joint purchases of anti-drone systems. Is this a real game changer? How do you see that initiative?
Well, I think this is a very significant development because we've seen the Ukrainian arms industry over the last 3 years just absolutely leap ahead in the quantity and quality of programs that it's been able to develop for long-range strike, for drones, counter-drones, self-propelled artillery and munitions production. Often the limiting factor has not been the great imagination and creativity of Ukrainian engineers and developers. It's been hard cash to procure more of the systems being produced. So I think the marriage of Ukrainian innovation, some of the technologies from the West, but a lot of the cash from the West, will continue to see Ukraine produce advanced, relevant weapons and munitions for this war, but also potential future wars as well.
And the Atlantic Council recently said that only Ukraine can teach NATO how to fight off swarms of Russian drones. Do you agree with that view?
Well, I think Ukraine has a huge amount to teach the rest of the world. I think the further you get from Ukraine, you need to make sure you're looking at the relevance because some of the things Ukraine is able to do just won't be possible in the Pacific. But if you're an Eastern European country or a Central European countries, Ukraine's lessons are extraordinarily relevant. They're timely. And I think that, military commanders throughout Europe need to be very humble to listen to Ukrainian commanders about some of the solutions they've come up with.
We have the ironic joke in Ukraine. You definitely know it, that it's not Ukraine who have to be a member of NATO, but it's NATO who have to be a member of Ukraine.
Well, I love the Ukrainian sense of humour. It's one of the reasons I keep coming back, and it's hard not to have those kind of sentiments. I mean, Ukraine has built the most capable military force on the European continent. It's shown that the Russian military was not the second most powerful army in the world. It's not even the second most powerful army in its own region. So, I think Ukraine has learnt a lot. It has got a lot to share. And I think it's built the kind of military that will act as a very powerful deterrent once this war is over.
And General Ryan, do you think that drone incursion into Poland actually could become a turning point, pushing NATO towards a no-fly zone over Ukraine?
Well, I'd love to think that's the case, but we haven't seen any real moves in that direction at the moment. I think you'll see the Poles and probably the Baltic nations step up their defences. The Poles in particular have announced procurement of additional counter-drone platforms. So I think you'll see more air defence over Eastern Europe. I don't see any significant shift in NATO policy or US policy about no-fly zones because at this point in time, European countries and the US administration don't want to put themselves in a position where they might have to shoot down Russian aircraft and kill Russians.
Well, that's a good point. But at the same time, General Ryan, When the US has confirmed that under new NATO funding mechanism, Ukraine will soon receive weapons directly from American stockpiles, while with allies paying for them. Yeah, that's true, but it's over 30 countries that are in NATO members who are now buying US weapons for Ukraine. So doesn't it mean that all the NATO countries they are already in this fight with Russia on Ukrainian territory, and they're still so afraid with this, as you said, hitting them with their weapon? But it's going on already. It's happening.
Well, the terrible irony, of course, is that Putin and other members of his administration have been reinforcing, even in the past week, that Russia is at war with NATO, whereas NATO, since the beginning of the war, has put up its hand and says, no, we're not at war with you. The reality is Russia's been at war with the West for many years. We've refused to acknowledge that. Russia's been conducting the largest scale subversion and sabotage campaign throughout Europe that we've seen since the Second World War. It's hard to see anything short than a direct attack by Russia on a European capital moving them at this point in time.
Well, with all of this fear of Eastern European countries that Russia will attack them, do you think it's quite possible, considering the financial situation there?
Well, Russia's in pretty dire straits economically. Europe is a very large, wealthy entity, far more wealthy than Russia. Indeed, its military forces are far more larger and more capable than Russia. But for some reason, in the West, not just in Europe, but in other countries like NATO, we've lost confidence in our own ability to push back on authoritarian aggression, to push back on their subversion and hybrid warfare that's happened in the Pacific as it's happened in Europe. We need to get back that confidence that we're defending democracies that are worth defending, just as Ukraine is defending a system, a culture, a democracy, a system that's worth defending. We've lost that in the West. Ukraine has kind of shown us the way back to that, but we're not back there yet.
At the same time, Poland's president, Karol Nawrocki, he says he hopes to host French nuclear weapons. Do you see this as a serious step or more as a political message to scare Russia?
Well, different NATO countries that haven't developed nuclear weapons have hosted US nuclear weapons under the NATO nuclear sharing program. About 6 different countries have done that. I would see this as an adjunct to that NATO program directly between Poland and France. Now, just because Poland is willing to do it, we're not clear whether the French are willing to actually share their nuclear weapons with Poland. But it's a very interesting development to see nuclear weapons hosted further forward and closer to Russia than what we've seen for a while.
But technically speaking, is it even possible to station nuclear weapons in Poland in the near terms?
Well, if Poland and France think it is, it probably is. I mean, it's just a matter of ensuring we know which aircraft they're going to be mounted on. Are the aircraft fitted for dropping nuclear weapons? You know, we're probably not talking about big missiles. We're talking about nuclear bombs that would be dropped from Polish aircraft. It's not clear yet whether Poland has the aircraft that have all the mechanisms and the safety procedures to be able to carry those weapons.
Could we station that weapon in Ukraine? Is that ever possible?
Well, I mean, anything's possible if you can imagine it, but I imagine that would deeply upset Putin even more than he already is, and might push him further towards the use of a tactical nuclear weapon against Ukraine. You know, I think everything's possible as a deterrent in the future, but at this point of the war, stationing a nuclear weapon on Ukraine probably isn't the way that President Zelensky and his strategic advisors are thinking.
Yeah. General Ryan, thank you so much for your time. As always, it's always a pleasure to have you here in our studio.
Thank you, and Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава!